speaking of those whole bunch of things, I mean, cinematography, you were shooting it, you edited it.
Yes.
So I've got to ask, which hat was the most difficult? No. As far as getting this story and kind of figuring out, because there's obviously the story of who Patrick plays and the weirdness of that, but
Yes.
then there is the story of the people telling the story or giving us this information somehow. Mm-hmm. Was that initial idea starting from that notion of people coming across this information?
So it really began like we knew this idea of having an immortal character, and kind of like we figured a documentary would be the best way to approach it, because we wanted to basically do a period piece out of almost every decade of the 20th century. So like, here's one way we can do it without having to like have our actors aging up and down. And so it definitely, because initially it was a short film, but when we decided this was a feature story, the idea of like following the characters, finding him, kind of came into play as like a way to actually make a story out of it, as opposed to just making it, a documentary about the guy's life just by itself.
Well, I love that outside of those people who are amazed at what's going on, everyone else that knows him has already come to terms with that.
Yes.
I love that notion of like, that's just him. It's just Arthur. Like, what are you supposed to do? He doesn't age.
One of the first things we establish is that like, this is true. Like, we're getting that out of the way first and foremost.
So as far as the title, was it always personal history?
We, for the longest time, we're every single person in our studio is just terrible at titles, so it takes a long time to come to a good one. And for the longest time, it was just Immortal Man, and we're not calling it that. That's terrible. And so one day we're just, my producer and I are just throwing out a ton of different options, and he landed on personal history. I'm like, well, when you're right, you're right. That's a good one.
As far as being picked up by Tallgrass, knowing it's going to have this home base, what did that mean? Like, what was that notion that not only this film, but like Patrick, I mean, there's other films, like you guys are representing Tallgrass very much from a home base. What does that mean to you, and what was it like?
So this is my first time at Tallgrass, which is very exciting. For the longest time, it's been a strange balance of like, you usually see a couple Kansas features in there, but it's like, it feels, it was a major step up. So getting to be one of those was a great honor, and getting to everyone, almost everybody who's in the movie or involved in the movie, this is their first time being a part of it. So it was great to be able to do that with all of them as well.
So like, we lug around this camera work. So your character, the absent-mindedness of leaving cameras open, leaving cameras on, I loved that. I thought it was such a beautiful thing that so many people will get in the industry, but in other industries. I'm curious, as far as that tongue-in-cheek nature to the writing, do you consider this a comedy?
Not particularly. I think there's a few inside baseball moments that are, anytime anyone turns on a light, you say striking, and then everyone's eyes go directly to the light. That's, that was one of them. As soon as, you're at the table read, everybody who's a filmmaker is immediately laughing. And, obviously there's a lot of ways because with this having the pseudo documentary aspect, the question immediately is always going to be, why are they recording this part? And there's so many tricks in that bag, but some of them are so true to life, like leaving the camera on when you thought you already stopped it. So we definitely played around with that quite a bit.
It started out as a short.
Yes.
It's now a feature. Are there other incarnations of this character? Like, have you Arthur at the grocery store? Like, where has this character gone?
There were several different ideas of how to approach it. I think because originally I was going to co-write it with another member of my team, and I very quickly kind of just took hold, and I had an idea of, because I think, the first instinct, and like there's a Twilight Zone episode that has a similar premise, where like they have been involved with every major historical event. They've been everywhere, and it's like, well, I mean, that wouldn't necessarily happen. Had not been alive that long in the grand scheme of things, just very long for a human being. So, like, in most people's lives, they don't even really branch out that far. But I think the idea of finding out that he hasn't accomplished very much in that time was far more interesting to me, and we'll see how well it plays to an audience. But
well, I laughed. I think one of my favorite lines is they're trying to pinpoint like all the things he's lived through, like the experiences of these grand things, and he's like, I was 9. I don't have any recollection of this. Right. And they're like, what about World War I? Yeah, it was a big wars going on. I did go there. I was like, this guy's awesome. I love how aloof he is to the world.
Yes.
As far as picking and choosing, like you said, you wanted to show every decade. Mm-hmm. Visually, there's little touches you guys have that I think are really subtle. Can you talk about framing wise? Did you separate it like that? Like, you're going to jump to this scene, we're going to have this. I mean, how meticulous with the time mm-hmm. that you're in, that we're seeing, was a part of kind of the structure of the script? In
the film itself, we try to keep it fairly vague, just so like it's almost to kind of shut down anybody who's going to bring up inaccuracies right from the get-go. But it's, we plotted out sort of like a timeline. There were kind of 3 timelines that we had to focus on: major historical events that were going on, and what Arthur's like the path he might have crossed with it, what's going on in Arthur's life at the time, and then we also wanted to kind of follow like the history of, because he's essentially born at the moment of motion picture film. So in a way, like, we could kind of have him catch up to it eventually, and then follow suit. But then, as we're with it being a documentary, it gets thrown around a whole lot, and it's like, well, we're just gonna we're gonna divvy it up. But we did a lot of research in the beginning of it to so that we knew what was going on.
What did you shoot on?
So I think there were a total of 12 cameras. Some of them were still frame, but we majoritively, like, the modern day stuff was on a A7S Mark III, a Sony, and then a couple of other Sony cameras during the interview segments. But then a major reason I wanted to do this film was because I thought it'd be just an incredible opportunity and task and challenge to shoot on older formats. So we had, home video cameras, and then we had 16 millimeter and Super 8, which getting to do those was a dream come true in many ways.
Kodak film?
Yes.
How much reel did you have? Like, how much did you actually have?
We didn't end up buying that much. We were we plotted it out very very conservatively as far as like how much we were going to use. We kind of like figured out, like edited in our heads beforehand, and I think we had two reels of each for Super 8 and 16.
As the editor, how much, I know there's a lot of work in it, but for Film Geek, it must be really exciting to mix those in, the different editing styles, and then it's pretty seamless throughout the movie. I was amazed. I was trying to pinpoint. I think I figured out the 8 quickly. The 16, I was like, I think it's this one, but it could be this one, because you guys also did some color things or something to the grain. I don't know.
Yes.
But what was the editing process like?
So, I mean, it was, the nice part is, there are systems in place. Like, this was a big part of that research ahead of time, was figuring out how this is all done. And I had kind of like dabbled in it a little bit over the years, because I had it in my back pocket for so long. But there are systems in place that you can get 4K scans for surprisingly fairly cheap compared to what you might think it would be. And so, there's a long wait period to see what you got, and I'm just waiting to find out that I wasted my producer's money, and then it comes back, and we're so happy with every little bit of it. Even because in many ways, some of it we're shooting to sort of look amateur on purpose, and some of the shots that he was like, oh, that's not gonna look good at all. He's like, it works perfectly within the context of the movie. So it was a lot to balance as far as again, the timeline coming into play. It's like in divvying out the information as it's coming along. You kind of had to edit it like a real documentary in many ways, but you've already kind of narrowed it down in your head as to what you want. So the editing took a little bit longer than it usually does for me, but it wasn't as difficult of a task as I thought it would be.
You filmed this during the pandemic or just prior?
This was tail end of 2021, so we kind of hit a sweet spot where it was at a lower point, right before it really ramped up again. And so, the entire crew throughout the entire shoot was wearing masks outside of the actors, and we shot a movie a few weeks ago that had the same systems in place. But it was something to keep in mind as we were going along. I think there was a point during the summer where it started looking a little hairy again, and we got a little bit concerned, but timing worked out for us just right.
You've mentioned your team.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about this team and how big this is, and where you guys kind of shoot and locate. For those that know this area, kind of give them the run through.
Sure. My team is Illumination Cinema. Back in 2013, almost 10 years ago now, which is crazy to think. It started as a cloud-based group of 3 filmmakers. I was here I initially was in my hometown of Winfield, Kansas, and moved up to Wichita. But Chris Strong, who wore many hats on this movie as well, he started out in the DFW area in Texas, and then we had another filmmaker in Australia, which is always the surprising one. But the idea was we would eventually, all kind of congregate here. The Australian one stayed out there, but and he helps us from time to time. But we brought on more people. We usually hang around like 5 or 6 people at a time. But possibility of expanding is always there. And everybody has their different strengths, but everybody's kind of a writer or director as well. We had a lot of first-time people coming in over the years, and I got the opportunity to produce a lot of their directorial debuts, which was a lot of fun. So it's a small group. We spread ourselves pretty thin, and then we love working with whoever we can around town or from KC, and then we always have the opportunity to bring people in as well. We're so used to the cloud-based thing that, you know, the pandemic didn't slow us down even a little bit, because it's like, well, just hop on what the modern equivalent of Skype, you know. And
you mentioned earlier you were just filming, so I've got to ask, what is down the line for the company, for yourself? Is there anything you can share with us about what's next?
I spent the entirety of 2022 saying yes to everything, which was great and also a huge mistake, only for my time. But I recently directed. I got our executive producer Fritz Robinson like rolling on 16 millimeter film. I got him interested in doing it for this movie, and then he kept buying cameras. His marriage is still intact, thankfully. But then he was like, you know what? I really want to make a, you know, fun like 1930s like black and white like noir type movie, and he put me in the director's seat for it, and Patrick is back as well as an actor, and it was a ton of fun to shoot.
All 16 millimeter?
All 16, yeah. They're
feature length.
This is just a short film.
Okay, I was like,
thankfully, yeah.
Kind of expensive.
Yes. I would have talked him out of this out of the feature, but you know, we also do animated films at Illumination Cinema, and we a couple years ago released what we believe is the first feature-length animated film produced in Kansas. So we want to do that again. It's a huge undertaking, especially with such a small team, but that's something we definitely want to do. And I'm working on, we're kind of doing a little bit of a co-production of a little horror feature, I believe next year, and that should be pretty fun as well.
Do you mind if I ask what filmmakers influence you, since you do seem to have a nice historical view of not only film format but film genre?
It's an interesting spread. I have a lot of the generic film nerd ones. You know, obviously I've got like Tarantino and Kubrick, and I love David Fincher, but I also love, you know, animation directors like Genndy Tartakovsky and Brad Bird and a lot of those types.
Love Brad Bird.
Yeah,
very underrated.
I know.
Great story.
So good.
How can people keep in touch with Illumination Cinema? Can you share with us some of the sites, but also where does Personal History go from here? Is there another festival run moment, or is it maybe hopefully distribution eventually?
We do self-distribute a lot. We're kind of, you know, we always try to do something new. This is the fourth feature we've made. So, you know, we aimed a little bit higher this time. We're going to see what kind of comes out of that. I mean, this you know, this could be the end of it. But, you know, if all else fails, it'll be around. We always put things out on Vimeo on demand and all that, but illuminationcinema.com is the big one. We have all of we have all the socials, and they're on there as well. But I mean, we're hoping to get a couple more festivals out of Personal History, and then it'll definitely see the light of day for everybody else as soon as we can.
Well, Tyler, I really was impressed. I love the premise. Patrick's performance is pretty amazing.
I know.
He's really good in it. And I love finding formats. I love that you guys made a bold choice. Sounds like you do it quite often. So keep doing what you're doing, Illumination. We love it here. And can't wait to see, like you said, what the response is. It's a good film.
Thank you very much.